Alright, time for another draft science video presentation. Okay, so we'll finish up with Dr. Lincoln. So, to rephrase briefly, nutcase or fool or dupe or whatever, blah 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 blah. Just ad hominem, blah blah, garbage. Can't do any better than that. And so he left off saying, please rest assured that I will give your comments the attention they deserve. So apparently that doesn't mean anything. Because, of course, I did say, look, I saw the 1800 page of the photon experiment, single photon experiment. So what's your source? He couldn't provide that. I pointed out that his image of the single slit is garbage, all the other crapola, and the video itself has all the arguments in it, right? And I just rephrased a couple of them, and he acknowledges none of them. Pretends he's going to do some video on diffraction. This ought to be hilarious. Diffraction is like the word wave. Doesn't diffraction is just a simple concept that waves spread. That's it. Doesn't mean anything more. And clearly, photons aren't doing that because, as Feynman would point out, they're not going everywhere. They land in one single location, the photon. It doesn't wave everywhere. So that doesn't even work anyway. Anyway, it's just too stupid. All right. So that's where we left off. I pointed out, blah, blah, blah. This is all just the same old Feynman fables. Feynman's Fables. That ought to be, a book. A pamphlet, anyway. Because, there's no such thing as detector experiments. It's a nonsense conversation. No physicist. You shouldn't be able to even graduate. You shouldn't even get a grade in high school physics if you think it's possible to passively view photons and electrons. I mean, you should fairly and reasonably fail the course. Anyway, I asked him what his source was. Okay, and so then the other guy, the vegetate guy, tail guy, whatever, this is the Farley. Okay, this is the cowboy, the guy who thinks he's John Wayne, come to the rescue. Joke. So anyway, he says, he does quote me, and he says, the math compares two vectors in the single slit experiment, and the math works uses 4 vectors for the double slit experiment. Now, I've shown it in videos. I couldn't find the exact page again, so, to instruct one troll, I'm not going to bother. But in doing that, I did go to Michael Van Briesen's channel, and he's got so many crappy videos on the subject that I really should go through some more of those. But anyway, the fact is they have all of these different diffractions. There's actually an image on one of the Wikipedia pages. I think it's on the 2-slit one, the first one. So I'll have to go there. And they show the 3 different kinds, Kirchhoff and Flunkensflarzer and Flusenbusen. But they don't show what the actual pattern looks like, and they just show how the different mathematical formulas get different answers. So they get very different answers when the slits are wide, but the more narrow they get, then they all seem to get the same answer. So it's just pretty funny. But there's no comparison to the truth, so it is pretty funny. But anyway, I don't think it's a point worth arguing, and I'll explain why it's not a point worth arguing. You can logically understand you're forced to deal with the surfaces. Everything, all the premises of all the math you do is dependent on you understanding that vectors are coming from sources. That's in the math. And those sources always end up being the surfaces. So, there's really no point in me having to reiterate again that a single slit has 2 sources. A double slit can't have 2 sources. It has to have 4 sources. It's not that complicated. All right, well, this relates to a comment on my page, so I will get to that when we finish this little bit. All right, so I posted him a link to one of the math pages. He didn't find that sufficient. Where does it say that uses 2 vectors? It's in the math. You don't want to believe that. There's little n numbers sometimes. Sometimes they call it the wave number. And sometimes they just say it's the n math. And there's an n number in the math, so you can multiply times the number, and they do the 1/2 and then they square it, it's a mess. And again, why should I defend their convoluted wrong answer, okay, when I could just argue from the simple drawing that necessitates, okay, it doesn't give you any options. You provided no argument saying that anything I've illustrated is incorrect. And so I'll do that again. I'll illustrate it. I'll put it in motion, so to speak, and there's just nothing you can argue with there. The box has already been built that you're stuck in. Anyway. So then he does this Laplace's demon is also Farley. So, I mean, these people are just so despicable. You people support the trolls, the bro types and the rest of them. Support these morons doing this fake shit, this fake news crap. Alright, so he says, create any fake profiles of PhD Genesis lately. God, you are pathetic. So, apparently he's created another fake account and he's put my name on it. Apparently, I don't know. I'm not gonna go. I have no interest in unraveling all of these lies and deceptions and shenanigans. But the fact that this is allowed, that people can do this, that they can actually get away with this on the internet, where they can make fake accounts, giving people the impression that somebody else made the account, and then slander them as if they said something on a video, or they did this or they did that. I mean, this impersonating people should be really, really against the law. I mean, not just a little bit against the law, it should be a lot against the law. And here he is overtly doing it right on somebody else's video. I mean, it's disgusting. I have no secret accounts. Zero. I have no secret account anywhere. There are people who know of every account I have. There's no secret sock account by which I internet travel or comment. Ever. I have never made a disguised comment. Ever. Alright, and it's a disgusting lie to imply I ever play by your tacky, disgusting, rude, cowardly rules. Because I'm not a coward like you. I'm not a piece of shit, alright, who has to play these slimy games. Ever. It's never fucking happened, liar. Okay. P.S. The 1920s car and squirrel thing was a reference to the OP. You're supposed to know, I guess that's the, opening comment or something? Anyway, derpity derp derp. Right. So the opening comment was a crank, so I guess that's the 1920 car thing, and nutcase. Okay, and the guy didn't ask whether I was either or. So now I should make fun of Don Lincoln because he ain't going to get that part right. Alright, so he says, the more I think about it, I'm not sure if the opening question, there was a question, oh yes it was asking if he is a crank or not, versus, see, it didn't ask of versus. Okay, so you didn't get that right, so you're referencing this stupid one sentence and you can't describe it right. Anyway, versus crank or and nut. I'm leaning towards both plus more. So that was what the question was asking. So, no reference to the actual question. The lack of understanding and arrogance is staggering. So that's the best he can do. So I've offered the $2,000. I've pointed out his egregious errors. And this is the best he's got. You think so. So all I have to do is just say some crap. I think you're a coward. Okay, I really sincerely believe you're a coward. And I don't think you're very smart. And I think you probably smell. Those are all theories of mine. But you are a despicable person with no integrity to type this kind of mush. Okay, I've made really good arguments. The fact is you can't defeat them. You can't counter-argue any of them with an actual fact. You can't show me kinetic energy being collected. Why don't you show me, okay, an example of the, 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour doing half the work of a 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour? Why don't you show me the experimental evidence? That's right, you can't. Yeah. And this is how you reply when you can't do something, is to just call it a name. Because you're a coward and a petty piece of crap. You're a stupid, stinking loser. And now it's on you, okay? I mean, frankly. I mean, these people should be humiliated in the future, right? And let's understand, not because they didn't know better, okay? I gave them every opportunity to accept the reasonable criticism that his video was a steaming pile of shit. All right? And he won't accept any of that criticism. He won't address any of the errors. He won't address any of the misinformation. I mean, detector experiments. It's a ludicrous statement. And he won't concede he should do better than that. That science should do better than that. And instead just types this tripe. What is there to say? I mean, I'm just pointing out over and over again that all of these talking heads of physics are cowards, disgusting cowards. They run away every fucking time. They're disgusting. Obviously, they shouldn't be paid any public money. We shouldn't be paying fucking tax money to these lying sacks of dirty, smelly, lack of integrity shit. And that's what he's proving himself to be. They're reasonable critiques. He has addressed nothing. Okay. So now another stupid accusation. Where did those 2 thumbs up come from? So somebody thumbs up my comments. They what is this? It's some sort of amazing fact. And then they say something this stupid. Your audience isn't smart enough to find this thread because it involves too much hand-eye coordination. Right, and I can read the comments on the rest of this video. This science support video. Okay, and they're moronic. Alright, so whose audience is more ignorant and stupid and, uninterested in the truth? I think you're going to fail. The audience for this tripe, okay, is a lot dumber. I'm not saying my audience isn't dumb, because it is. But the audience for Dr. Lincoln is even dumber. Okay. And being able to spell things in a search bar or whatever. And in any case, they wouldn't come over here just to thumb up your comments. Well, obviously, I did read the comments in my video, which means, yeah, maybe somebody watching my videos thumbed up my comments. Big woo. Big surprise, huh? That never happens on the internet. Somebody has a channel and they direct people to a comment section and then they start thumbing up comments. Oh, that never happens on the internet. That's impossible. I mean, just such pathetically stupid arguments. So instead of arguing some actual physical experimental fact, instead of just providing me a link to the indestructible evidence of bent space or kinetic energy or waving photons, they do this instead. Because that's what science defenders do. They don't show evidence. They just do this horse shit. Distraction and evasion. Alright, so I say to the doctor, you won't defend that statement with any references to anything called evidence. I've offered you $2,000 for the opportunity to show where you're misguided. If it was just arrogance and no substance, why don't you take the money? Good question, right? It's very easy. Somebody offers me $2,000 to debunk them. Oh, how happy could I be? I mean, beautiful, fantastic, thank you. Ching ching. Anyway, you could show all the tinfoil hatters how strong your science is and get well paid to do it. So you could put me down, you know, just recognize that, oh, look, all you tinfoil hatters, you're just too simpleton, you're too stupid, you don't understand the real physics, you don't understand the real evidence, you haven't done enough research, you don't know enough about the subject. You could prove all that and show them all that they should just shut up and listen to your wise wisdom. But you don't do that. Why? Because you can't do that. Because you're the one full of fucking shit. Full of fake news. Full of fake experiments that were never conducted. Full of bizarre interpretations that make no sense to anyone but a drooling 3-year-old. I mean, oh, fuck. Your future humiliation is now not my fault. So I clearly gave you every opportunity to gracefully repair your misinformation, and you've chosen not to. Overtly chosen, no, I will not do that. I will not accept critique. I will not accept criticism. I will not accept that I'm overtly and plainly wrong in what I said, and he's just doubling down on his bullshit. So he deserves to be fucking hacked to pieces in the future, right? He deserves his reputation to be diminished substantially because he proved he doesn't give a fuck about the truth. He doesn't give a fuck about science. He doesn't give a fuck about its progress. He's basically saying, I'm wrong, and I know it. I don't have to demonstrate. I don't have to logically explain it. I don't have to do anything. I can just say you are wrong. And it's just such bullshit. That's exactly anti-science. You know, putting your little hands over your ears and covering your little eyes. Those are the images of somebody who doesn't care about the scientific method or process. All right. I've clearly pointed out your errors and you refuse to acknowledge them. You have shown you have no integrity. Okay. There's no response to that yet. Yeah. Okay. And so this is the usual rag. Okay. $2,000 isn't real money. This is their argument. Why would a highly paid professional go for $2,000? Really? $2,000 to do no work. I mean, it should be no work to debunk an idiot, right? Come on, get real. $2,000 to do nothing. Just about. It's free money. If I am the nutcase, if I am an idiot and an asshole and an uninformed and stupid, if I'm all of these things, this is easy money. All right. Just to put some crackpot nonsense. So again, they keep saying it and yet they can't demonstrate it. They can't give me the single fucking link to a single frickin' video that does it right. Link me to your leader. Link me to the good science. Show me the good science page. Where is it? See, because they know they're all flawed. Mind you, by someone who can't even read his own links that he puts down with no explanations. I don't even, what explanations was there? You wanted to see some complex two-slit math. Well, I showed you some. What you're saying makes zero sense. So again, where have you demonstrated any of that? I've said lots of things. I've said single slits don't make round circles. Why don't you show me one that did? I mean, you know, single slits that aren't bigger than the laser light. By the way, still waiting for you to put out a link that says the double slit pattern is created using 4 sources. I don't need to put out the link, but I already have in my videos. So again, you remember there's an image in one of my videos where they show it coming from the middle of the slit, the opening, and they draw the little line, and then they have an inset that shows, 4 lines, 4 sources. Yeah. So anyway, so I have shown it. And again, my argument is that they have any clue what they're doing. Okay, I mean, they're still doing all this sine theta crap, all this other crap you don't need to do. So why don't you show me some reasoning that points out that anything I've said is incorrect? Why don't you just play the clip of my video where I'm saying something wrong? It's provably wrong. Oh, because you're a coward. You can't do that. All right. Oh, you can find a 12-year-old video. You can do that too, but you can't find one of the videos I'm actually asking people to play. you provide a link that makes nothing even close to your proposition. So, well, that's obviously nonsense. I mean, obviously this page has a ton of very complex math on it, blah, 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 blah. And the W in this case is the number of sources, 2 equations, you know, blah, 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 blah. So, you know, you're going to pretend that's not an example. I'll say, yes, it is. Now, you can go to the other named guys, and theirs is slightly different. See, look, n. n equals 0, plus 1, plus 2. That's the number of sources, retard. God, you're so fucking stupid. Anyway. So, moving on. Okay, I've shown the video clearly illustrates the 4 vectors that define the double slit pattern. Regardless, I'm making the clear, so I don't care. I'm not even going to defend their 4-source math anymore. I'm just going to make the assertion that 99% of the time they don't even use that math, and they use this idiotic bullshit math of Young. The 2-wave math that never gets the right answer. It's not the right answer. I mean, not never. The only way it gets the right answer is, as I said, if they make the slit openings less than a wavelength, because then there's no difference between those 2 sources. The sources can't have a wavelength of difference if the sources are a wavelength apart. You idiot. Okay. Regardless, I'm making the clear assertion that you can link me to no actual pattern that cannot be described by the math I provided. So the simple mathematics I provided, it simply says to you the amount of wavelengths in the distance between the slits is completely dictating the number of bars you're going to see in the pattern. Okay, i.e. math that recognizes the number of surfaces defines the relevant vectors that create the phase and out of phase conditions. Alright, I do a little bit on how desperate the lying trolls defending science are. I mean, this is their audience, right? I mean, I don't think anybody who's ever going to be on my side, well, frankly, they're not going to be on my side if they resort to those kind of methods, and I'm certainly going to call them out on it, would go to these desperate lengths, you know, to defend something where they have to be liars and cheaters and make fake accounts, steal people's identity. These are, you know, invade their privacy. These are real egregious crimes being committed in defense of the good. No, it's in defense of bullshit, a fucking religious fable. These are religious terrorists. Alright, the fact that these kind of creeps are on conventional science side should give the reasonable reason to question the credibility of science. The fact that your science is attracting these kinds of fanatically insane cheaters and thieves should give you some pause. Why are such creepy people defending your science? Yes, good question. Let's see, I've shown better math on my videos. Then why don't you link me to that better math? Because I don't keep a register of every link and every place, and so yeah, I don't bother with all that crap. Okay, I make videos every fucking day, shit for brain. I really don't keep records of everything said and everything done, blah, 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 blah. Alright, so math that recognizes the number of surfaces defines the relevant vectors that create the phase and out of phase condition. Where does it say that in the wiki page? I didn't say it says that in the Wikipedia page. I said that's exactly what they're doing in the mathematics. That's why the inset shows the 4 vectors, idiot. Is because they know that's what they're actually doing, is creating 4 vectors and comparing their location. So they're conceding that argument, but they can't say it, because if they say it, then they have to say, yeah, Huygens is horseshit. This really doesn't have anything to do with waves. It has to do with surfaces. Okay, I'm begging you to provide a clear reference. I'm begging you to provide me a single shred of evidence. Link me to your leader. Where's the guy doing it right? Show me the professor doing the 2-slit analysis correctly, getting the correct answers, showing the pattern, measuring it, showing it's right. Where is that video? So, I mean, amazing. You've got billions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of scientists, all this bullshit, and you're the one who can't produce any evidence. Anyway. So he's ignored my regardless. Okay. You just linked to a page that doesn't say what you think it says. What do you think it says, asshole? If it's just two waves coming out of two openings, why all of this? Why all of this? If that's all it is, why all of this? Why is all of this, the integral, why is all this necessary? If it's just two waves. If that's all it is, a wave coming out of a big fat opening. If that's all it is, why all of this? So fucking stupid. Anyway, it directly contradicts your assertion because it builds up the pattern from all the parts of the waves in the middle of the slit. No, it doesn't. Because as all of them will tell you, all of those cancel. Professor Lewin will tell you that. Whatever that stupid, drawing science channel, whatever, the one Microsoft bought. Anyway, I'll ask again and again. Okay, so again, you're pretending you're asking me for evidence. I'm asking you for evidence. I've already just said to you, okay, so just to clear this up, I'm not going to defend their math anymore. They don't ever use good math, okay? Because every single one of those formulas is flawed. That's why they compare them. There's a comparison of the different theories, okay? And none of the comparisons is to an actual experiment. All of the comparisons are just to each one of their mathematical formulas. And they show the little animation of the right answers and how often they're in sync and how often they're getting the right answer. And it starts off really uneven. And then it calms down. Like I said, the thinner you make the slit, the more they all agree. Because there's no pattern. Oh. But yeah, I've already shown that shit in my videos. And again, you're asking me to personally instruct you? No, I'm not going to do that. The references are in the videos. Go to the videos and you'll see the references. Go to the Wikipedia page and click the links. Well, anyway. So just a dodge of every point made in the last 3 videos. Just an evasion. All right, so let's do the more interesting subject that has this incorporated into it. Okay, so Mick A. So I don't know what the fuck that is, but we'll go with it. Regarding disappearing photon. Okay, so this is the argument that you have a single slit. And then you have another slit next to it. You cover one of the slits, and you have light and dark. And then you open this slit, and a place that was light goes dark. Now, technically, it's not going to go dark. But the fact is the extra sources will make brighter and less bright areas inside of that. So, and technically, it might go dark, frankly. That's the interesting part of this. So that's the part we're going to animate now. We're going to just say, what if we did this experiment? And we'll just do it in different ways. Adding the additional surface by opening up the second slit could alter the vectors of the in-phase broken photon bits. It'll definitely create sources that are now can make it unreceivable. It can jam the photons. Yeah, that can happen. You're right. So this was really a good comment. Deflecting them out of phase. So it doesn't deflect anything. So let's understand, photons don't hit photons. So there's no deflecting. That's just bullshit. Do I win a Nobel Prize? Well, you've probably added more insight than any physicist has in the last 200 years. So in my opinion, I guess you are deserving, frankly. Because there's more insight in this comment than there is in anything Feynman ever said or anything Weinberg or any of these other douchebags ever fucking said. This is closer to a truth than anything they've ever even thought or imagined. And it's certainly way above Dr. Lincoln's functionality. Alright, so. Alright, now there's certain things that have to be, there's no point in just arguing it forever. I mean, you're either flat earthers or you're round earthers. Okay, so there's a simple thing in understanding that everyone agrees, okay, that in the single slit, this distance is the relevant distance, right? So that's the game. The game happens with this distance between the two surfaces. So there aren't two waves, one wave centered here and one wave centered here. If you're thinking, oh, there's two waves that come out of the single slit and they're centered here, that doesn't get the right answer. That's not what's happening. All right, so clearly if you want to draw the waves for the single slit interference pattern, again, it's calling it diffraction doesn't change the D number. It doesn't change the fact that this is the distance in the math. The math is taking vectors from this point and this point. All right, so if you want to draw it as a wave, the wave has to be drawn here and here, okay, which obviously amplifies to here, okay, and here. Now that doesn't look very likely, but whatever. So that should be the undisputable part. So if you can't say, oh, you agree, you accept that that's the math and that math does get correct answers using this distance, okay, between the surfaces. Those are the two wave centers. If that isn't agreeable to everyone, then there's really no reason to have any further conversation, is there? I mean, to me, this is an undisputable, unrefutable fact. I agree. Dr. Lincoln agrees. Khan Academy agrees. Everybody agrees this is the single slit math. This is the distance between the sources. These are vectors, and we're going to compare the length of these vectors. And where there's a complete whole wavelength of difference in the length of the lines, that will be an on node, okay? And when there's a half or something close to that, that would be a definite off. So when they're out of phase, it's off. When they're in phase, it's on. Now, that has to be the agreeable truth here. So the single slit has two sources. Is that disputable? And obviously, if I'm going to move two single slits next to each other, all right. Well, so I'm just saying. So it's, if you don't agree that this is their math, that this is the variable, this L variable, and the wavelength of the light, that's all there is. Those three variables are the only variables in the experiment. If you can't agree, then there's no more room for conversation, really. It's over. We're done talking to each other because, Mars-Venus thing. We just can't communicate because we can't agree on vocabulary or irrefutable facts. All right. So now you have two slits, okay? You have two single slits right next, okay, and we won't put them next to each other yet. All right, so I have one over here and I have one over here. All right, so they're let's just make them a mile away, okay? This one's a mile away from this one, and what they're both going to do is this vector math, and they're both going to create a pattern, and the pattern's going to have a bigger center, and then it's going to have nodes on the side. And I can have up to 50 or 60 of these little dots, depending on how wide I make the slit and how clean my laser is. So if I have my laser nice and far from the pattern, and I'm sending nice straight rays or waves of light, right? Either way you want to draw it, I can get a lot of these little bars. If I have this distance is say 150 wavelengths, then I can have 150 little bars, and maybe 100 of them will be visible, 50 maybe not. Anyway, I can make a pattern that spreads pretty far. And again, I've already made the argument, but the math, quite obviously, this L is a radius, okay? It's a radius. So you do the L number, the math is predicting a location in space that is L away. L away, L away. It is not predicting here on a flat screen. It's predicting a curved arc. That's another point we have to agree on. If we don't agree on that, then there's no point in continuing. It's fundamental. It's so elemental. If you can't agree that that's the unrefutable factual physics, the math is predicting here and here and here. It is not predicting out here on an infinite plane. Shit. All right. All right. So now what happens? So the obvious argument I have made. So if you have these two patterns, okay, and they're going to be identical patterns. This one's going to create the same pattern miles away. Okay, and they're going to be the same size. Now, if I put these two things next to each other, and this thing is only 1/2 of a millimeter, right? The single impediment becomes only 1/2 of a millimeter. So I slide this one over here, and now I have an impediment that's only 1/2 of a millimeter. Okay, and I have these two single slits. You can understand that the pattern would have to sort of reflect what just took place, which would be I have two of the same patterns, right? These are going to create exactly the same patterns, and I'd have them, they would just be blurry, right? That one of them would be just a millimeter off of the other one. So we're talking about something like the central maximum might be 5 inches across, all right? And we're talking about just one tiny millimeter that this one's off. So the two patterns would be sitting on top of each other with just a millimeter of difference, right? Now this is an unrefutable fact again, right? We can all say that that's what's going to happen. The same pattern will be created here, same pattern here. If I make them 1 millimeter apart, the two patterns are going to be sitting right on top of each other, and it's going to look like nothing really changed, right? But we know, something else is going on, because that's not what happens in the actual experiment. So we know the actual experiment can't make that happen, because these vectors, okay, won't do that. And it's not because of my theory. They won't do it by your own theory, because these distances are now very different, okay, when you have the two patterns next to each other. So the thing you're comparing isn't this pattern and this pattern. You're comparing, here is a, so let's, okay, we can leave that. And what I'm saying is you can understand logically. So this is the one, this is where you have to take a step, beyond your current understanding. You know this isn't true, that they're a millimeter apart and the two patterns don't superimpose. We know that doesn't happen because we have this completely new pattern, okay, that has dot, 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 and then dot, dot, and then dot, dot. I mean, you know that's what you're going to get, the new pattern. So you know it's not the same as just moving 1 millimeter. Yeah, you can't see that great, but whatever. People have to have some knowledge of the experiment to be in this conversation, frankly. All right, so let's take it from this point, that if you had these two vectors, okay, and let's say there's a wavelength of difference and it makes a light here. So now this is a bright. What happens when I add these vectors? Now there's no guarantee that this distance is a whole wavelength. So if it's not a whole wavelength, then this same location won't be a bright. This one can't make a contribution. And we know because these two are the same, that is, they're creating a bright here, that this slit and this, if this one isn't in phase, this one can't be in phase. So at any one location, we know that if this one's not in phase when it adds, then this one can't be either, okay? Because these distances are tied to each other, because they're the same slit experiment. So that won't work. But what I'm saying is that what the clear argument is that the distances I made aren't that I've created two slit patterns with these two same distances, D and D. The clear thing that's changed is I've made this D and I've made this D. I've made this distance and I've made this distance by having the two things next to each other. So when I open this, I'm not creating another this. I'm creating this distance and this distance. And those are the ones making the contribution. Now, as I pointed out, the D number is important just because it's just telling you how many little nodes you're going to have. So a big distance means lots of little bars. A short distance means very few bars. So big long ones for a narrow slit. Little tiny ones for a very wide slit. Wide slit, little tiny bars. So we know that if this was a bright, right? So let's enlarge this one little spot. And we have a bright there. We know that what I'm really adding is little nodes. So I'm going to make some parts of this are going to get brighter. Okay, that's going to be the key ingredient. Now it might just actually get darker because you're going to be adding some out of phase bits. So if you're adding out of phase bits, you're going to break whatever there was there. But the fact is this is what you're going to be making, are these little ones. So obviously some portion at least of this original one has to go dark, because some portion of it is going to have to accommodate these new little bars that are really the pattern. The little bars that are the combining of the two patterns. So as I've pointed out, you can clearly see, I mean, I just can't believe that you people are still, that there's anyone still arguing for any other way to describe this experiment than what I've just pointed out here about these distances and the fact that they create, that you can just tell how many possible locations there are for constructive or destructive interference. That of course the distance is dictating it. You're just making a triangle and you're just saying how many places, you know, can this triangle create the wavelength of difference. So you're just saying that this platform is completely deciding how many there can be. There's no other thing. This is deciding it. So you might as well just draw the little wavelength notches right in there. It's so obvious. Okay. So, so what do I want to sum up with? So obviously, all the double slit is, there's no mystery of the two patterns and all that stuff. It's really easy to see that this distance, okay, is making the little bars. All right, and they're continuous. Yes, they get dimmer as you go further out because we're always projecting it on a flat screen, which makes it dimmer and makes them distorted. And the fact is fewer photons get deflected a lot. A lot get deflected a little. Few photons get deflected a lot, so we don't see this part of the pattern probably very often or ever. I mean, scientists could actually do this experiment. They could put a camera over here, a piece of film, and they could say, let's see if we can see any of these photons. And let's see if they have a pattern. But they never even did it. With all their billions, they never even did it. So anyway, so this is creating that. And then this is creating the envelope, which is big stretched out bars. All right. And clearly, where the two of them overlap, where both of them are on, those are the spots you'll actually see. And the dead spots will be where either this is missing or that's missing. Those will be the darks. So where the two overlap, clearly that's the pattern you'll see that'll be visible. So that when the four sources hit, more photons, where only two of the sources hit, very few photons, and they can be out of phase depending on the width of the slit. It's more likely to be out of phase than in phase. This distance is more likely to be not perfect whole number of wavelengths. Right, the whole number of wavelength things being exactly on the inch mark or whatever is less likely than missing. There's a lot more ways. There's a lot of ways to miss than to hit in terms of being a full wavelength. But anyway, so yes, some of the sources, when you add these two sources, it's more likely they're out of phase than in phase. Because to be in phase, this has to be a perfect size. It has to be exactly a wavelength of distance. This has to be exactly 15 wavelengths. If it's not 15 wavelengths, then yes, these sources are going to be out of phase at any one specific location that was in phase here. Anyway, so the pattern changes is all you need to understand. But it's just, look, the whole argument is as simple as just saying, can you understand that if I was to draw waves here, right, I could draw a wave here, and I could draw a wave here. That's one option. Or I could look at it and say, what is it really doing? What else does it doing? And then I could say, it's making a wave here, and it's making a wave here. And the simple argument is, this is the right answer. This fails. This creates point sources here and here, where this creates point sources here, 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 and here, which is logical, which is perfectly consistent with the idea that you're combining multiple point sources. When I took the single slit and it had 2 point sources, right? You can see the single slit has 2 point sources here and here. So why, when the double slit shows up, are you eliminating those point sources and making these 2 point sources? Why are you? Does that make any sense? That when I merge the 2 slits, all of a sudden the point source goes from here at the surface to here in the middle of the opening, and that even though I had 2 with the single slit, I still only have 2 with the double slit. There's only 2 waves. And you logically can know that 2 waves, that is 2 vectors, can't possibly create 2 patterns. They can't create these overlapping patterns. So how can you possibly argue this? I just can't believe that anybody who has any knowledge of the experiment, the hype, the bullshit that's been going on for years and years, they've been telling these silly stories, when this answer is so obvious. The envelope is really an envelope. It's a real frickin' slit experiment. And here it is, right here. The single impediment is causing the envelope. And clearly the furthest distance is making the little tiny bars, and you're just saying where the 2 line up. Then I have 4 sources in phase. If I have 4 sources in phase, I have a lot of capacity to remake a photon. Come on. God, I just can't believe so many people are just such lying scum that they just can't concede that, yes, this is perfectly logical. It explains the mystery. It's over. It's done. This is a complete answer. You just don't need to know anything else. It answers the questions. Mystery solved. Anyway. So, we'll call that a video. Hell with it. It's just so obnoxious. This is such an unnecessary, all this horse shit, because these people just aren't capable of having arguments. I mean, arguments are always going to involve some cheap shots. You know, your mother wears army boots. I mean, that's been going on forever. But the fact that they can't add any content at all to the cheap shots. I mean, I don't mind being insulted if there's an actual argument, but it's just all they have is the insult. They don't have any argument. They don't link me to any evidence. I mean, it's, you know, it just shouldn't be this fucking stupid. It shouldn't have to be this stupid. I mean, fixing the future, you know, giving the future the right answer shouldn't be this much work. Shit. Anyway. Alright, so that's enough. Get the hell out of here. Yeah, so like I said, I did these Michael Van Briesen, I think they're right here. He has a whole bunch of different videos, and you know, some of these drawings are just so obviously wrong that I have to say, well, I don't know why I didn't get around to ripping that one a new asshole, because that's just stupid. You know, I think that one has no. See, that's one's showing 2 sources again. You know, that slits just create 2, you know, 2 waves. You know, out of 2 openings. You know, just completely ignoring the 4 sources. Let's see if we can find one that has 4. That would be cool. This one looks kind of 4-ish here, but I don't know how many number of slits that is. It says really the bad thing is I remember one of the videos out of this series. I mean, he calls it double slit interference, and then he does multi-slits and all this other stuff. He doesn't really even do the double slit. So it's really sucks. Then he made a series where he doesn't, he puts double slit in the title, and it's really not the double slit. But anyway, so we'll get to some of that maybe. But it's all so fucking redundant. Ugh. And frankly, the made-up intensity arguments are just that. I mean, they're just making that crap up. They've never measured any of this shit. It's all theoretical. It doesn't have anything to do with actual facts. Alright, this one seems to be drawing an awful lot of vectors, so maybe that one has some of the better math in it. So they call this diffraction of light, so that ought to be pretty funny also. Another playlist. Well, anyway, it's an awful lot of videos, and to make an awful mess of the subject, frankly. But we'll get to some of that maybe. Alright, anyway. This has been another DraftScience video presentation, but probably no point. I mean, there's just not enough intelligent life on Earth. It's just the truth. There's just not enough of it. It's not even, it's not smart enough to even have the conversation in some kind of reasonable manner. Well, anyway, I give up. So till the next time, and such and so forth and whatnot. Me.